Relax, it's just a bug.
Whoa!
That's not a bug!
Hit and drone. Seen it, covered it. We know a thing or two because we've seen a thing or two.
We are farmers. Bum, 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 bum.
Yeah, farmers, lower my rates.
Now to my favorite part of the show, Money Power Politics. More and more voices on the left are pushing policies that would have previously been off limits, calling for sweeping economic and social changes to level the playing field between people at the very top, and the vast majority of Americans. But here's the question.
Because that's the role of government, is to level the playing field between those at the top and those at the bottom.
What role should those very wealthy Americans play in making that change, or should they play a role at all? Anand Giridharadas is the author of Winner Takes All, the subtitle, The Elite Charade of Changing the World. On Sunday, I was about to embark on a 4-hour afternoon where my husband and I were going to have no kids and hang out. And then Anand and I got in an argument on the Twitter, and that resulted in me starting to listen to his book, much to my
we got into an argument on the Twitter. What a boomer.
husband's chagrin. But to my pleasure, I think this book is fantastic, and I want to talk about it. Welcome.
Thank you for having me.
You argue that billionaires who are trying to help, they're offering symbolic scraps while they're still monopolizing the benefits that only help themselves, and it's
Monopolizing the benefits? What does that mean? Monopolizing the benefits. The term monopoly went to describe a company that had complete control of an industry or a sector of the industry. Now we're just tossing it around to people who make a lot of money. Monopolizing the benefits? Get the fuck out of here.
a perverse incentive system, and these guys are out for no good.
You know, that's exactly right. I observed something that I think you've observed and many of your viewers will have observed, which is that you can't walk down the street without bumping into a plutocrat who says they want to change the world and make the world a better place. More money being given away than ever. You know, people have these foundations. They do disruptive this, disruptive that. Mark Zuckerberg's trying to fix education. He's trying to eradicate all the diseases, even though Facebook's a little bit of a plague. You know, he's not alone. The Google guys are trying to emancipate people through information. Every rich person has a plan to save the world these days. And yet, this is the toughest time to be a working or middle-class American in 100 years, a period of yawning.
By what standard is it the toughest? Yeah, when you look at, you know, when you're a classist moron like this guy and you just look at numbers, oh, who's getting the biggest percentage of the wealth? Yeah, you might come away with that impression, but the standard of living is certainly higher, despite all of the intervention in the economy. I mean, what would you rather be? Would you rather be a billionaire in 1919 or someone who makes $40,000 a year in 2019? That's a rhetorical question.
Inequality. And all the data, remember data, these people claim they like big data, except the data I'm about to say, which is that they continue to monopolize the fruits of progress. 82% of new wealth created in 2017 went to the global top 1%.
The global top 1%? So is he talking about America or global politics here?
United States over the last 40 years, the top 1% doubled their share of the nation's income, right? It's a really different country when the top 1% have about 12, 13% of the national income, and when they have 25, 26% where we are now. So while these people have been giving back, changing the world, emancipating, disrupting, what they've actually been doing over here where we're not looking is just grabbing more and more of the pie, rigging the rules to ensure that keeps happening.
This is just zero-sum classist nonsense. Oh, they're just doing it so to throw us off their scent so they can take more of the pie. There is no pie. There's no global pie. Wealth is created. It's not just this fixed amount that's just distributed here and there. Just look at this. You can't win with these knuckleheads, these altruistic collectivist knuckleheads, because if the top 1%, if the greedy billionaires and millionaires, if they just kept all of their money, if they didn't donate any of their money or give back, so to speak, if they didn't set up philanthropies or donate to charities, guys like this would say, oh, well, they're being selfish, they're being greedy, they're just hoarding all their wealth, they're not giving back, they're buying stocks, and they're giving it to their spoiled kids, and they're buying big fancy yachts and bigger mansions, and who needs $1 billion? But then if they start setting up philanthropies and donating to charity and giving back and being conscious and trying to help out society, oh, well, then they're being selfish. They're doing it for PR. They're doing it to save face. They're doing it for a tax write-off, a tax benefit. They're doing it to distract us so they can take more wealth over here and just get more of the economy and get more of the money. You can't win with these knuckleheads.
And frankly, using the moral glow that comes with philanthropy, giving something to, Malala, having a Photoshop here and there.
Yeah, maybe these billionaires should tell Malala Yousafzai to get bent next time she asks for money to open up a school in Syria. I mean, what incentive do they have? If they don't give it away, then they're selfish. They give it to Malala Yousafzai and she opens up a school in Syria. Oh, well, they're still selfish because they're just doing it for to look moral and to look good.
To protect the opportunity to keep hoarding, keep monopolizing, and keep stiffing most Americans out of the American dream.
I hear you, but I want to share sort of the tweet that started this conversation between you and I. It's from former Labor Secretary Robert Reich, who wrote, "Anyone who has $1 billion either exploited a monopoly that should have been broken up, got inside information unavailable to other investors, bribed some politicians, or inherited the money from their parents who did one of the above."
And Robert Reich is full of shit.
Here's my issue with this argument. Hate the game, not the player. If the argument is, if you became that rich.
This isn't a game. I know what she says. Oh, she's just speaking metaphorically. But I hate it when people, oh, it's the game.
You must be some crooked criminal. How are we possibly going to get people, how are we going to get that powerful class to the table to be self-reflective, to say, let's make sure the world doesn't crumble beneath me and make things better? If we're strictly demonizing the super rich, why on earth would they do anything but build a higher wall around their houses?
I don't think that's actually about demonizing. And I think that this is an argument.
Hold on, it's not demonizing.
No, let me explain why. Let me explain why. If you were a man in 1900, you could be a good man or you could be a bad man. But there was no man in 1900 who didn't benefit from the systemic exclusion and persecution of women in every job that those women couldn't compete for. The fact that women couldn't vote for public policies that would be better for half the country, etc.
Amen to that.
There were good men and bad men in that regime, but all of them benefited from an unfair system, right? So
what does that have to do with demonizing? Well, you notice how he's deflecting? She asked, is it a good idea to demonize these people? Are you afraid if we demonize these people too much, they won't even want to talk to us or work with us to help make society a better place? And his answer is, oh, well, look at what people were doing in the 1900s with systemic discrimination against women, and they were I mean, put aside the fact that no one benefits from discrimination, ultimately. I think discrimination is evil, and ultimately no one benefits when people are irrationally discriminated against. Things are better, society is better when there's more integration and people are judged as individuals. We get better services, better products, a more rational society. But that's all besides the point, because he's totally dodging the question. Hey, should we demonize these people? You think that's a good idea? Well, what about 100 years ago when women couldn't get a job because of discrimination?
The argument there is not that all of those men were crooks or who was not. And I don't want to get into, I have gotten to know through my reporting a lot of billionaires. This is never, and I say this again and again, not a matter of individual morality. This is about an immoral system, and a system that prioritizes having billionaires and letting them keep their billions over health care for everybody. Yeah,
that's what America is about. The individual has a right to life, liberty, and the pursuit of property and happiness. Was there an asterisk in the Declaration of Independence? Was there any fine print that says, oh, until you make $1 billion, then the government can take it from you to take care of other people?
Over education that is as good in the south side of Chicago as it is in Greenwich, Connecticut. It's not a question.
Chicago spends what? I think at least $15,000. I think they spend like $18,000 per student per year on education, and it's been run by Democrats uninterrupted for, since the 60s. And somehow it's the billionaires and the rich people's fault. Chicago has a high education budget. I don't think that's Bill Gates' fault that they have crappy schools.
Of are billionaires bad people. We have made a very weird social decision to allow people to be billionaires before we take care of the public good. And to the point about nefarious or whatever we were arguing about, you know, I think what is undeniably true, if you actually just look at the Forbes list, monopoly is a very big part of many of those stories, right?
How so? Monopoly? Monopolies are only possible through government favors and coercion and all that crap. So I got into it the other day. Someone was like, said Amazon and Walmart, they're big monopolies, but they're in competition with one another. How can you have two big competitors in an industry, but then they both be monopolies? It's impossible. You hear this from the right wing too. Oh, these tech companies, they're monopolies. Facebook, Twitter, Google, Netflix, Amazon. Meanwhile, they're all in competition with one another. We also got Twitch coming up.
So we'll take those off. I don't think most Americans actually like monopoly. Fighting for regulations in Washington that allow you to make more than you would make if you didn't have a $50 million lobbying operation. Again, that's not free market. If you're confident about your ability in the free market.
Yeah, the government redistributes trillions of dollars every year, and there are dozens, if not over 100 regulatory agencies at the federal level. Yeah, I wouldn't call what we have the beacon of capitalism.
Shouldn't matter.
You don't lobby $50 million in Washington.
It's like this meme I made a couple weeks ago where people, the same people will say, well, what, you don't like socialism? What about Social Security and Medicare and public schools and roads and the EPA? That's all socialism. You like all that, so let's have more socialism. But then anything that bad happens, like the financial crisis, if too many Americans can't afford health insurance, if there's poverty here and there, then it's all the result of unfettered free market capitalism.
If you think about the number of those companies on that 400 Forbes list that underpay workers, that have shifted to contract janitors and dynamic scheduling.
Okay, but right here, then the problem there is capitalism.
Capitalism's the problem. There you go.
Problem there is, if I'm the CEO of a company, my job function, my fiduciary role is to serve my shareholders and my customers. If we want to change the rules, if we want to change the system and suddenly say, as a CEO of this publicly traded company, I must care about the environment, I must do better for my workers, well, then you're changing things. When Goldman Sachs decided to do their 10,000 Women initiative, they went to their shareholders and their shareholders said, take a hike. This is our money.
It is their money. The shareholders own the company, and no one wants to buy stock in a company that doesn't give a return on their investment.
If you want to do something philanthropic with our money, you don't get that opportunity.
Yeah, they're not. Goldman Sachs is not in the business of being philanthropic. They're in the business of paying their shareholders and turning profits.
We get to make that decision. So is it the fault of that CEO or the company, or is it the fault of the system? And we need to say, well, let's revisit how the system works. Because if I'm a CEO, I have to adhere to my fiduciary responsibilities.
I think you're exactly right. And I think one of the
I'd like you to say that one more time.
I think you're just so, Stephanie, you're so right.
Come on, every day.
I think one of the things that actually is surprising to people about my book, although I'm a critic of these companies, is I actually think that it's their job to be companies, and it's the society's job to take care of the public good. I think what...
Says who? Society has responsibilities? Since when?
What I don't like is those companies using some cosmetic do-gooding to try to stave off democratic action. I'm going to read... I have this...
Again, just be selfish, because if you give all your money away, pieces of crap like this will still say that you're selfish. Might as well just go all in on it.
Wonderful network of informants in the biggest companies in America telling me what's really going on. Right?
I like that.
I'll tell you something I got yesterday in an email from someone in one of the most powerful in the news companies in America. This person writes, the only thing that can be trusted in this era of financialization is that companies will primarily act for profit, so other forces must be empowered to combat, counterbalance, and curb this. I think a lot of wise people in corporate America are actually starting to realize the truth of that statement. It's their job to play offense. It's the society's job to think about what kind of health care we need, what kind of education we need, and actually to set the rules of the road that will allow most people to avail of the American dream.
I'm with you, and we have the same ultimate goal. But if what's happening
What's your ultimate goal? Communism?
right now on the progressive left is demonizing, is to say it should be illegal for Jeff Bezos to be that rich. He's a bad person. This person's a bad person.
Who said he's a bad person?
How are we going
But who said he's a bad person? I don't think Jeff Bezos should be a billionaire or at least have as many billions as he has. Who said he's a bad person?
But do you think that
My guess is, I've heard he cooks pancakes for guests at his house. I've heard he's a very nice person. That's what I've heard.
do we not
That doesn't mean I
have to-
think he should be a billionaire. And I'll tell you,
That's fair.
let's
So
take
don't
him
we
for
have
a
to
second.
Figure out
By the way,
a way to get those people to the table, because if I turn on
how do you make it illegal for Jeff Bezos to be a billionaire? How do you take his money away? Because he's that rich because his Amazon shares are worth so much. He owns that many shares of Amazon and they're worth ungodly amounts of money, and that's why he's rich. It's not like he has those billions of dollars in a vault somewhere like Scrooge McDuck. So how do you force him to drive down to below $1 billion? Are you going to force him to sell his company? Are you going to buy the company from? You can't buy the shares from him because then he'll literally have billions of dollars. So what are you going to do? Are you going to force him to sell his stock at a loss? Is that what you're suggesting? This business that he built out of nothing? Amazon, that was all Jeff Bezos. He created it out of nothing, and now he's rich, ungodly rich, because the value of his company is so insanely high. So how do you not make him a billionaire without being a total fascist?
let's say conservative media, we run the risk that we're going to go down a slippery slope where Americans are going to say, hold on, are you controlling how much money I make? And that's not the argument you're trying
That's literally what you're calling for.
to make. But if we allow a certain narrative, right, it's like, why is the NRA as powerful as they are? There's tons of people who are members of the NRA who want a little bit of gun control. But the NRA convinces them, well, it's a slippery slope. And if they take bump stocks away, they're coming for your handgun.
Charles, too, has a really good podcast about social justice warriors, and he talks about slippery slopes. And the fact that bad premises do have logical, foreseeable conclusions. And so, yeah, when you start this premise of people shouldn't be allowed to have $1 billion, society has a responsibility to level the playing field, and they should be allowed to decide who gets to have how much money. Yeah, the logical conclusion to that is communism. And though premises like that do have logical conclusions, it's no coincidence that the progressive movement just started with a little public education here, a little social safety net here, and now we're discussing whether or not billionaires should be allowed. We have more regulatory agencies, a lot more wealth redistribution since the progressive era 100 years ago. Started with the Federal Reserve and a little bit of welfare. Now we have Medicare, Medicaid, Social Security, Obamacare, the EPA, all subsidies for whichever corporation or business has the loudest microphone, largest megaphone, loudest voice. Yeah, slippery slope. Bad premises have logical conclusions, whether you think so or not.
In 6 months. If we go on a hardcore argument that rich people got these gains through nefarious ways, suddenly we could hurt this argument where people say, you can't control how much money I want to make.
I disagree, and I'll tell you why.
No time left.
Who was the last
oh,
president?
sorry.
Who was the last president who actually did do a little bit of demonizing? FDR. Called a malefactor.
Yeah, what a great guy that FDR was. Outlawed gold, locked Japanese Americans in prison camps. Became very authoritarian when the Supreme Court kept throwing out his New Deal policies. He threatened to pack the court. What a great guy that FDR was. Also, this guy just said that it's not about demonizing, and now he's saying, oh, well, what about FDR? He was the last guy to demonize, and look at all the stuff he got done. Look how great that FDR was.
Factors of wealth. He was one of them. He was a traitor to his class, which is one of the most noble things you can be.
President Obama did.
A lot more tempered in his approach than FDR. He did not demonize at all. He talked about, we need to have regulation, common sense regulation, but there was not a going after. We have not seen Democratic presidents in the modern era go after malefactors of wealth, that kind of language.
I'm with you, yes.
And FDR used the political capital that gave him to actually enact a regulatory apparatus that served us fairly well in terms of finance for decades. And I think a little bit of demon.
Yeah, those New Deal programs really pulled America out of the Great Depression. And Social Security is just so sound and doing so wonderful. It's on such a great trajectory.
Of people who are stealing the dream from people is fine. You know, I think what you have plutocrats like Donald Trump doing is taking the real anxiety that many Americans have, and instead of actually leading those Americans to punch up at the powerful who stole it, getting them to punch out at Mexicans and other fantasy causes.
And then he's hooking up the powerful.
Correct. And stuffing his cabinet full of them right before they croak. And so I think what's really important right now is for a new politics in this country, not about left and right, but frankly about humanism versus plutocracy.
How about altruism versus rational self-interest? How about individualism versus collectivism? How about reason versus mysticism? That should be the new politics.
Spent the last 5 months traveling the country, having these conversations with people. A lot of people come into my book events who are on the right, who do all kinds of jobs, who are on the left. And I will tell you, a lot of people have different views about markets, about government. Fine, that's fine. But not a lot of Americans want to live in a Downton Abbey society where very few people own everything, set the rules of the game, and throw symbolic scraps at people from the top of the...
Does anyone want to live in that society where there's just a few people with a lot of money and then no one else has anything and everyone else is just cooking rats over a dumpster fire? Is anyone saying, yeah, I want that? Sounds good to me.